Hello and welcome to another standard gameplay video on the official MTG Arena channel. Today we're taking a look at a black-green or Golgari graveyard deck, focusing on some of the new cards from the Brothers War, including a Deathbloom Ritualist. I've been looking for a good home for this card for quite a while, and I think I found one here. The 5-mana 3/5 can tap, adding X mana of any one color, where X is the number of creature cards in our graveyard. So this deck is fully focused on putting creatures in the graveyard to enable Deathbloom Ritualist and some of our other synergies. So as you can tell, the entire deck is all creatures except for 4 copies of Storm the Festival, since this makes for a great mana sink to play once we do have a Ritualist with a full graveyard, as we'll be able to make a ton of mana, potentially even cast and flashback Storm the Festival in the same turn, and then we get to take a look at the top 5 cards of our library to put up to 2 permanent cards with mana value 5 or less from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest goes back on the bottom of our library. And then the flashback cost is 10 mana, which may seem out of reach, but not actually all that difficult to achieve with our Ritualist, and then Storm the Festival can hit all the creatures in our deck, as well as some nice lands in the mana base, like Argoth Sanctum of Nature, which besides melding with Titania, which we're playing 2 copies of in the deck, can also just be a nice way to fill the graveyard, since we have, of course, plenty of graveyard synergies, and then make a 2/2 bear token in the process as well. And then taking a look at some of our other synergies, we've got the full set of Urborg Lurgoyf, and that's why you see a little bit of blue mana in the mana base. It's to kick our Lurgoyf for both blue and black, in which case it's going to cost 4 mana, so we're typically not actually playing Lurgoyf at 2, better to wait and kick it for 4 mana total, and then for each time it was kicked we get to mill 3 cards, so we can potentially mill 6 total if we doubly kicked it, and then it will grow with the number of creatures in our graveyard, so much like the Ritualist, also benefits from having a ton of creatures in the deck, and more specifically in the graveyard. And then I'm also playing 4 copies of Skyfisher Spider as the main interaction in our deck, a 3/3 with reach, and when it enters the battlefield we may sacrifice another creature. When we do, we can destroy any target non-land permanent, so incredibly versatile, and we've got a few creatures we don't mind sacrificing in this deck, such as the Blanchwood Prowler, a 1/1 that when it enters mills 3 cards, and we may put a land card from among the milled cards into our hand. If not, the Prowler picks up a +1/+1 counter, so we're actively hoping to find a land, in which case the Prowler is just a nice value creature that replaces itself. Sometimes it'll mill 3 creatures, and then we're left with a 2/2, which is not particularly exciting, but it will have put 3 creatures in the graveyard, which of course is great with the Lurgoyf and the Ritualist as well. And then besides sacrificing Prowler, we can of course sacrifice any other creature that we may have in play. We've got Old Rutstein, which also generates 1/1 tokens, as well as of course Argoth, which can also make 2/2 bear tokens that we typically don't mind sacrificing. And then when the Spider dies, we can also decide to exile it instead of putting it in our graveyard, and then it will gain 1 life for each creature card in our graveyard. So that can also gain a ton of life, which can be useful against some more aggressive decks in the format. Sometimes you'll actively want to sacrifice a Spider to a second Spider just to be able to gain that life back. And then we also have 2 copies of Ulvenwald Oddity, which may seem a bit out of place in this deck as it doesn't have any immediate graveyard synergy, but it just functions as another great mana sink to potentially activate with our Deathbloom Ritualist as a 4/4 with Trample and Haste, and then for 7 mana transforms into the Behemoth, an 8/8 with Trample and Haste, giving other creatures we control +1/+1 Trample and Haste as well, since that's sometimes a problem with this deck, is if the opponent has a bunch of small chump blockers out, then they can easily chump block a large Urborg Lurgoyf. Now with the Transformed Oddity, it will also gain Trample, so the opponent will no longer be able to chump as easily, and then giving the team Haste also means we can potentially play Ritualist and activate it in the same turn, which is also quite satisfying. And then looking at some of our cheaper cards, we've got the full set of a Reclusive Taxidermist, which is a mana creature, giving us a small mana boost early on, and then once we have 4 or more creature cards in our graveyard, it actually picks up +3/+2, so turns into a 4/4 creature, so once it's done making mana, it actually turns into a pretty effective beater. And then we also have quite a few legendary creatures in our deck, all of them also green, so that will help with Argoth coming into play untapped. And then 2 of those are the Jukai Visionary, a 1/3 legendary snake druid, also an enchantment, and then for 1 and a green we can tap and activate it, returning it back to our hand, revealing the top 4 cards of our library, and then we can put a land from among those onto the battlefield tapped, so that will help us ramp, and the rest ends up in our graveyard, so still helps fill the graveyard for the other graveyard synergies. And then if it does end up in our hand, we can maybe channel it as well for double X and double green, discarding it and returning X target non-legendary cards from our graveyard to our hand. so sadly cannot get back all our legendaries, which would be a little bit too powerful and looping additional copies of Visionary, but still very good at maybe getting back, let's say, a Storm the Festival before we flash it back, or get back a Ritualist, Spider, or even Oddity to help close out the game. And then 2 copies of Old Stick Fingers, which has power and toughness equal to the number of creatures in our graveyard, so typically you don't want to play this on turn 2 with an empty graveyard, but then later in the game we can sink a bunch of mana into it, including with our Ritualist as well, and then when it enters the battlefield, it will end up putting X creature cards from our library into our graveyard, so a perfect way to fill the yard for our various graveyard synergies, and then will also turn into a very large creature itself. And then at 3 mana, the legendary creatures continue with Urg, Spawn of Turg, always fun to say, has 5 toughness and power equal to the number of land cards in our graveyard, so this one doesn't look at creatures but lands instead, and at the beginning of our upkeep we get to surveil 1, so potentially put additional cards into our graveyard, unless we like the card that's on top. And then we can also potentially pay a black and a green, sacrifice a land to gain 2 life. Can also be useful against some of the burn decks in the format as a nice mana sink. And then by sacking a land, we also increase its power, because it has power equal to the number of lands. And then 2 copies of Old Rutstein, which can also slowly put more cards into our graveyard when it enters and at the beginning of each upkeep. If we milled a land, we get a treasure. If we mill a creature, we get a 1/1 insect token. And if we milled or Storm the Festival, which is the only other option, then we get to make a blood token instead, which can also help us draw and discard. And then finally 2 copies of Titania, a 3/4 with a reach, saying whenever 1 or more land cards are put into our graveyard from anywhere, we get to gain 2 life, so it can also be a nice repeated source of life gain. And then at the beginning of our upkeep, if there are 4 or more land cards in our graveyard, and we both own and control Titania and a land named Argoth, then we get to meld the pair into Titania Gaia Incarnate, which will return all lands from our graveyard onto the battlefield, and then has power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control, has Vigilance, Reach, Trample, and Haste, and can also pay 3 and a green to put 4 +1/+1 counters on a land, turning it into a 0/0 elemental in the process, so it can also be a fun way to end the game. And then I think we've covered all the spells in the main deck. The mana base has 2 copies of Argoth, and then a Boseiju can also be channeled, also quite synergistic with putting a land in the graveyard to maybe gain life with Titania, for instance. And then the Abandoned Mire can also mill additional cards when we channel it, and because we have so many legendaries, both of these will also get a discount, which can also come up. And then a couple basics, 2 swamps for forests, and then a couple dual lands. Of course, need a bit of blue mana as well to enable the kicker on Lurgoyf. So that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw, and our hand seems fine. Got our Prowler to hopefully find an extra land, although I could also play the Visionary first. And then looking for a blue source to kick the Lurgoyf twice. Facing red aggro. So, yeah, I think I'll go for Visionary first. Opponent's got Squee, so the 3/3 can attack past Visionary, but we can block the 1/1 token at least. And then, now we could pass, plan to activate Visionary. Could also play Prowler, and then that we can maybe sacrifice to the Spider next turn to take out Squee. Titania also reasonable. So maybe Titania's actually better. 3/4, can block Squee. If they finish it off, so be it. If not, it can also start gaining life when we play Prowler or activate Visionary, which we can maybe double spell next turn. A Reckless Impulse finds Warfare, which they can play next turn. So Squee can attack past Titania. Just a Kumano for now. So it doesn't seem like they'll be attacking. Okay. And yeah, I think we stick to the plan. Play Prowler. And can maybe play that before playing a land. And there's my blue mana. And then I think I plan to activate Visionary as opposed to play a Lurgoyf since we want to play it kicked. And then when we activate Visionary, we'll maybe gain some more life with Titania too. So there's a Warfare. So don't really want to block Squee with Titania anymore. Opponent at least tapped out of red mana, so don't need to worry about any burn spells. Can block the Phoenix Chick with Titania, however. And then want to keep Prowler to sack to Spider, so they'll get to keep the 1/1, or we can just block it with Visionary, and then take the damage of Squee, as opposed to chumping Squee and activating Visionary, which is an option too. Yeah, this seems better. So damage happens. Activate Visionary. And yeah, I'll take the green source. Okay, so we've got a couple options now. Could go for Spider, taking out the Warfare. And then I could still replay Visionary. That looks good. And then now we can block Squee once again. Next turn we'll have 7 mana. So might be time to deploy a Ritualist too, which is close to maybe transforming the Behemoth in the same turn. Ooh, Unlicensed Hearse, was not expecting that one. That's a setback. So a Ritualist looks a lot worse now. Can dig towards another Spider to maybe take that out. And then for now, how do we block? Spider, take out Etching. Block a 1/1. And I'll block Squee, I guess. They can likely finish off Titania with a burn spell. But at least that's gone. Okay. So opponent's still at 20. Could try and turn the corner with Oddity. Lurgoyf is going to shrink very quickly. So my best bet might be Visionary, milling another Spider and then picking it back up. And then for the time being, I guess just play Ritualist and then activate Visionary. At least Oddity gives us a win condition that doesn't fully rely on the graveyard. So good to have a bit of variety. So the Hearse can also turn into a creature, of course, once they no longer need to activate it. So there's 2 Spiders left in the deck we can hope to mill. And our opponent replaying Squee from the graveyard, although they don't seem to have any great attacks. End of turn Visionary. And did not mill a Spider. So Visionary does not get back legendaries, so Ritualist is the only target for it. Although I could maybe kick Lurgoyf twice and then hope to mill Spider that way. Okay, no Spider. Did find Argoth. So we could get some stuff back. And this taps for 7, so that's quite a bit. Could also just play Oddity and transform it, which at this point is maybe just a play. Sure. So can attack for 16, leave Spider back on defense. And then what's the worst that could happen next turn? This can be crewed as a 4/4. If they have another Warfare, they could play it, animate Foundry. So that could hurt. How much damage are we taking? 3, 6, 7, 8 from the token, 9, 10, 11. So yeah, that would leave us dead. So I probably need to leave 1 extra blocker back and just send the Lurgoyf, which will probably shrink down soon. Felden. Alright, opponent crews Hearse, so we get a chance to block it. So I think we'll be okay. And then no need to block Felden, let's just block, let's say, Squee here. And then we should have lethal on the way back. Okay, awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand seems reasonable. Prowler, hopefully pick up a third land, and then we've got a couple of options on 3. And then Lurgoyf, we're hoping to kick a few times. Opponent to red-white. Virtuoso, okay, so that type of deck. Well, our deck doesn't feature a whole lot of removal, so a large Virtuoso is going to be a problem. Need to find our Spider to answer it. I'll play the Taxidermist to guarantee an extra mana, as opposed to Prowler. Prowler could also be better once we play Titania to gain a bit of life back. Okay, never mind. Play with Fire. Kills Taxidermist. So I can still play a 3-drop, and Rutstein probably provides the most value over time. Get a treasure. So we're slowly getting towards Storm the Festival as well. Ignition on the Virtuoso, that's effective. Although opponent seems tapped out, so could top deck a Spider now to take it out. And can block the infantry safely. Rutstein mills a land for another treasure, and there's our Spider. Now we could also play Prowler so we can sacrifice that to the Spider. Just need to hit a land and 3 cards, so that should work, right? Okay. Sigh of relief. And at this point all our lands were untapped, since we also have a green legendary in play. So sacrifice Prowler, take out Virtuoso. And then don't really plan on blocking with Rutstein, so probably fine to attack with it. If Spider dies, we can gain a bit of life back. Ignition on infantry. Hits for 6. So next turn we're back to 4 mana, although I can play a kicked Lurgoyf, which could grow quite large. I think I still take it for now. Don't think the red-white deck has a lot of actual burn spells. And then tap carefully here not to take any damage. And a 9/10 Goyf, yeah, that's pretty good. Titania is also ready to transform once we find the land to go with it. Did we mill any? We did not. Okay, Kumano I guess is technically a burn spell, and I guess they did also show us play with fire. Possible they have Lightning Strike in there as well, but I kinda doubt it, since they need room for pump spells to go with a Virtuoso. Down to 2, that's scary. So I'll sacrifice Spider if I get the chance, but that will have to wait. So Titania can also maybe gain some life back. And we'll pass. So that to a play with fire. Another Kumano down to 1. Okay. Make sure not to tap my Lenor Wastes for colored mana now. Rutstein mills creature. Drew a lands, so we can cast Storm the Festival. I'll manually tap here just in case. And we'll see what we can find. Okay, another Spider, that's excellent. So I'll sacrifice the other Spider to gain 10 life. And our opponent explodes, awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, hand seems fine. Turn to either Visionary or Taxidermist. And then try and doubly kick Lurgoyf. Stick Finger is not a bad follow-up. So against blue-green, yeah, maybe we'll go with the Taxidermist first. Give us that small mana boost. Rutstein also an option. Could already doubly kick Lurgoyf, although I kind of want to get my value engines going. So we'll try Rutstein. Could see a counterspell as well. Alright, get a treasure. So I could still play 2-drop, and let's make it Visionary. And a Faithful Mending, so put in some sort of a Graveyard Reanimator deck. And yeah, Portal to Phyrexia discarded, so they could reanimate that turn 5 with an Invoke Justice. Or a Repair and Recharge. We get lucky, hit another treasure. So the clock is ticking. Opponents will be able to overpower us in the late game, so we need to make sure we make these next couple turns count. So let's say we activate Visionary, can still kick Lurgoyf once, and then maybe next turn storm the festival, or I can save my treasure token to make sure we storm, and then just play Lurgoyf without kicking, although that's kind of sad. I guess we do need the early pressure, and we still have Stick Fingers to fill the graveyard, so sure, I'll play Lurgoyf unkicked to keep our treasure around. And then Rutstein can attack. End of turn activate Visionary. And next turn, hopefully storm the festival. Opponent with a Stern Lesson. Another discard outlet. We also kind of want to go wide, so hoping Rutstein makes a few tokens so we can sacrifice those to Portal to Phyrexia. Could also be a mistake to put some more creatures in the graveyard here, and yeah, Visionary did not find a land, so that's unfortunate. At least grows Lurgoyf. And got a token, drew a land, so we can still cast Storm the Festival, which, yeah, I think we should go for it. Played first in case we grow Lurgoyf some more. And double Prowler has the highest chance of growing Lurgoyf, and that also gives us more sacrifice fodder. Probably want some more green mana at this point. Alright, second Prowler does not hit a land. Attack for 9. So we might be able to survive a Portal to Phyrexia now. Opponent cycles Herd Migration, gains 3, gets a land. So currently still just Portal in the graveyard, but Faithful Mending could find something more exciting. Although what's more exciting than a Portal to Phyrexia? Hope there's no board wipe. Repair and Recharge, so there's Portal. Sacrifice token, double Prowler. And if I play Stick Fingers for 2, we grow Goyf by 2, 13, 14, 18. Yeah, that should do it. I guess we can even do it for 3. Wow, so actually managed to beat a Portal. But we needed to get pretty lucky with Rutstein making treasure early on. And eventually making a few insects for us to sacrifice as well. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Hand is pretty reasonable. Prowler we're happy to sacrifice to Spider. Get this tapped Argoth out of the way. Just missing a 3 mana play. Facing a banned deck of some variety. Alright, so an artifact deck and Urg we can not quite play, sadly, since we don't have double black. That's a little awkward. I'll hit for 1 since Automaton's likely to grow. So had I played a tapped Glade on 1, I would have been able to maybe play Urg on 3. Although then we still would have had a tapped Argoth in hand. Although then Urg would let it come into play untapped, so yeah, I guess it would have worked out a little bit better. Okay, so now just gonna go for Urg, since Spider cannot take out Automaton. So I guess the fact that we didn't curve out perfectly didn't matter a whole lot. And then hope to start putting more creatures in the graveyard for Ritualist, which we can play next turn. Simulacrum. Grows Automaton, 4/4, can still be blocked by Urg. But they can send in both to push 3 damage. Okay. And Spider will put in the graveyard, make more mana for Ritualist. And then next turn we could potentially double spell nicely. Broker's Ascendancy we can maybe take out with the Spider. And another Storm the Festival I'll happily keep. So if I play Spider, sacking Prowler, a 4th creature ends up in the graveyard, and then we can still Storm the Festival. So I think I like that sequence. And hits double Taxidermist, probably. Seems better than 2 lands. Don't think my opponent has many board wipes, which would be a reason to maybe just grab the land instead. And then next turn we can flashback Storm the Festival instead of casting 1. Oddity I'll keep. Great with a Ritualist as well. So how much mana are we working with? 4, 5, 6, plus 7, 13. So we can play Oddity and Storm. Could play Oddity and transform it, although not quite at the point where we can attack all. So at that point I may be better off just flashing back Storm the Festival, and I'll hang on to Abandoned Mire in case we want to channel it. And then hit Spider and Rutstein. Spider, I guess, also doesn't have any amazing targets, although we can pay the ward this time. And then we'll see what we end up sacrificing in a second. Since we can mill with Rutstein first, maybe make a token. Alright, just a treasure. So I can sack a Spider to the Spider, which is probably okay. Take out Automaton. And pay the ward. And then do we want to gain 5? No, not really. Prefer an extra creature in the yard. Hang on to Abandoned Mire, I think. Can channel it for 2 mana since we control 2 legendaries. Another Simulacrum. Opponent spreads out the counters a bit. Possible they have some Flicker synergies with the prototypes and all these ETB effects. For now we get to mill a few more cards. And possibly play another Storm the Festival, potentially even flashing it back in the same turn. And Visionary, it's not a bad card to keep on top. If I keep it on top, I would mill with Rutstein, I suppose. So at that point, maybe better just putting it in the graveyard. Yeah, I might have wanted to switch those triggers around. Okay, get a treasure, find another Ritualist. So step 1, Storm the Festival, I guess. Finding another Ritualist, and yeah, Titania could transform, since we already have Argoth. And then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, potentially 11 mana left. Do we just flash back Storm the Festival? Sure. And I'll hang on to Abandoned Mire, since I might see myself getting back a legend. And I'll go for Oddity and Lurgoyf. Okay. Pass it back. Assembler picks up a counter. And next turn we can generate 12 mana with just the 2 Ritualists. Steel Seraph can give the Automaton flying, although we do have 2 reach creatures back. And our opponent hangs back anyway. Once again, I should have probably switched those triggers around, but at this point we should be okay. Could have also channeled Abandoned Mire to maybe give us a shot at transforming Titania, although wouldn't be incredibly large with only 4 lands in the graveyard. So, now what? Boseiju can deal with any of the opponent's creatures as well. we can activate Oddity for sure. And then with the team having haste, I can play a Ritualist and activate it right away. So that's pretty fun. So that can help me play another Oddity if I'd like. And our opponent has seen enough, understandably. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand seems a bit clunky with no early plays, so we'll take a mulligan. This is better. One Ritualist probably has to go. And then we're looking at Taxidermist into a Prowler. Maybe turn 4 Ritualists. And hope to pick up Storm the Festival would be great as a mana sink. And for now, Taxidermist. Next turn, maybe Urg. Opponent might have had a removal spell for Taxidermist, but chose not to take it out. Okay, so we'll give Urg a shot, and then I can still attack for 1 with Taxidermist. So I can maybe start there. Could have also saved myself 1 damage by using the Taxidermist, but I'm probably happy dealing 1 to the opponent. And then Urg still potentially dies to a cutdown, which could have been a reason to go for Prowler first, since it still has 0 power at the moment. Depopulate will wipe the board, at least we got to draw now. Okay, we can play fully kicked Lurgoyf. That seems fine. Next turn Ritualists. And then we'll play Argoth later. Milled 2 creatures. So it could have been better. But still a 5/6. Shieldreds. It's gonna start draining us. So attack with Lurgoyf, play Ritualists. Since I don't expect Lurgoyf to necessarily be back as a blocker. Could play Prowler if we're afraid of Invoke Despair next turn, which would also be reasonable. Currently don't have a great way to spend all the mana from Ritualist. Although for opponents supporting double white for Depopulate, I'm not sure they'll have a consistent enough mana base to support quadruple black for Invoke Despair. Not impossible, of course. And the black-white dual lands help. And yeah, we'll take 4. And Storm the Festival, perfect draw here. Still gonna play Prowler first, since we'll likely mill more creatures to make mana with Ritualist. And then grow Lurgoyf at the same time. Milled Storm the Festival. Okay, grab Argoth. Can play it, and then this makes 9 mana, so yeah, we can flash back Storm the Festival this turn. Hope to hit a Spider to take out Shieldreds. Hit a Ritualist and a land instead. Still pretty good. Although we are definitely overextending into another Depopulate Lurgoyf attacks. For opponent chumps, we know Depopulate's incoming. Undying Malice instead, fair enough. So opponent's going to transform Flash Gorger into a 7/5 after chumping. So yeah, that's going to hurt a little bit. Although now it's clear that there's not going to be a board wipe incoming, and next turn we'll be able to cast and flashback Storm the Festival. Still have Argoth we can activate as well. So it's not all bad. So, double chump Flesh Gorger. Probably a necessity, although that will make a future Spider Wars as we have less sacrifice fodder to work with. If I just jump Shieldreds, then I'll go to 1, which is kind of sketchy too. So this is probably the safest line that leaves me with the best chance of doing some damage next turn. Since we won't be able to take out the Flesh Gorger anymore, just have to try and block it instead. But Shieldred we can still take out with a Spider. Okay. So probably fine to activate Argoth first. Although if I hit a Titania, might be better to play afterwards. So, sure, we'll Storm first. And then there's Titania. And Spider's gotta be the pick as well. And then, yeah, I guess now I regret not making a token first with Argoth. So maybe that was still the play, just to enable Spider. But in response I can make a ton of green mana. And then sacrifice Ritualist to take out Shieldred. Opponent might have another Undying Malice here. Now Argoth comes into play untapped at least. Alright, take up the shield to protect Shieldred instead. So probably activate at least one Argoth, and then we'll see where we're at. So I could activate Argoth again, flashback Storm, or we can flashback double Storm, which seems better. So let's do that. So Lurgoyf plus Rutstein it is. And then if I can gain a little bit more life off Titania, I'll be able to target the Flesh Gorger in the future. So let's go for it. And there's Spider now. Okay, and then Lurgoyf. Now I guess the problem with taking out Flesh Gorger is that I would die to Shieldred, unless I sacrifice another Spider. So yeah, that should be the move. Sack Spider, getting 13, taking out Flesh Gorger. And then we should be out of danger. And attack for 12. Well, that was quite the turn. I guess Depopulate would still be pretty bad for us. Outside of that, we should have it covered. Titania also about to transform. So please, opponent, don't ruin this for us. That's the power of Ritualist alongside Storm the Festival. Sadly, they explode before we get a chance to meld. But you get the idea. I've done a Titania meld video on my channel if you want to see the animation. Not that there is a whole lot to it. But yeah, that's our black-green graveyard deck in action. Capable of some very crazy openings and a ton of fun to play. Still kind of a casual deck. I would not recommend it for the ranked ladder, since there's plenty of incidental graveyard hate in Standard. Think of Graveyard Trespasser and Corpse Appraiser in the black mid-range decks, and then if you ever have the misfortune of facing a Farewell, that card's incredibly brutal, as it'll exile your entire graveyard as well. So not recommended for ranked, but a ton of fun to just play in the casual queue. So that'll do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.